to target the brain stimulation. The brain stimulation is going to stimulate an area in my head about the size of a marble. And they have 5 different targets they're going to aim their TMS at. And they have chosen the targets based on neurological research, and they're within these different folds of the brain. You've probably all seen pictures of the brain with folds like fingerprints, and you might think that the folds in your brain are unique, like a fingerprint, but they're not. Actually, the folds are characteristic of humans. So this particular fold in me, you have one, and you and every one of you has one. And so they had targeted these folds, but what they had to know is, where's that particular whirl or fold relative to some point they can see on the outside? So that MRI map allowed them to target the area with respect to the points of my ears and nose and my eyes and all. And that's what they did. They set me in a chair and they calibrated their TMS coil by using like a laser pointer to point out features on my face. And then they held the coil up to my head and they started to do a stimulation. They said to me, we're going to stimulate you for half an hour, and then we're going to set you down quick at the computer, and we're going to do the same tests, but with different faces and figures again, and we're going to measure any change in you. And you've got to hurry, because we have to test you within 15 minutes, because the effect of the stimulation is only going to last about half as long as we stimulate you. And I thought, well, what good is that? Why would anyone want to do this if it only lasts 15 minutes? And they said, well, that's not the whole thing. First of all, if we stimulate you once, it's going to last 15 minutes. But if we stimulated you every day for half an hour, it would last several hours. And if we did that for a month, it would last maybe for weeks. So the more we do it, the longer the effect would build up. And by stimulating you once in a different area, they said it's really safe because the effect fades away in half an hour. So if it does something we don't like, well, the effect's gone and it's safe for you. And that sounded sensible and reassuring. And they said, well, this is what we've learned using brain stimulation to measure function in people with strokes and in disabilities. But this is the first time that we've tried brain stimulation for deeper cognitive processes like seeing emotions. So something never done before. So I get kind of an inkling now that I'm like, truly a guinea pig. And anyway, they do it. And they sit me down in front of the computer, and I'm wondering, am I going to recognize all the faces now? And it isn't a bit different. I don't recognize a single thing. And I thought, what kind of crazy fool was I to think that I would sit down in this chair and they would zap me and I would walk out different. And so they bring me out and they let me walk around for about half an hour, and then I got an interview with a neurologist to make sure I'm okay to go home. And the neurologist, he sits me up on a chair and he does the thing, tapping my knees for my reflexes and stuff, and he says, what day is it? And I say, it's Tuesday. And he looks at me and he says, you sure? I said, yeah, I'm sure. And he said, it's Thursday. And I said, oh, well, yeah, I'm self-employed, so I don't get the days straight. I kind of had visions of myself, heading for a locked cage in the basement of Beth Israel Hospital. But somehow, the neurologist, he lets that go, and he decides to release me. And so anyhow, I get in the car, and it's been a couple hours now since the stimulation, and the effects are long gone, they said. And got to pull out onto the highway. And from my time doing music, I had a lot of live recordings of bands, and I would listen to music on my iPod. This is back before iPhones existed. And I'd listen to music driving home. And I pull out onto the road and to turn on my iPod connected to the radio, and I'm listening to this band called Tavares. I don't know if many of you listen to soul music. This is kind of more country and western music part of the country, but for those of you who were alive in the 70s, Tavares and the Bee Gees were the bands that sang the soundtrack for Saturday Night Fever. It was one of the biggest movies ever. back in the late 70s. A lot of people think it was just the Bee Gees, but Tamaris actually, a lot of songs. And Tamaris was a group of guys who actually came out of New Bedford, Massachusetts, right near me. And so before they were big with that, they sang in a Boston club scene. And I turn on the iPod, and it's a recording of these guys playing live. And it was like stepping into a hallucination when the music came on. The music came on, and I wasn't even in the car. I was like back in there. It was so vivid and so real. It's like you could smell the cigarette smoke, and you could see the spotlights. You could see all the musicians moving on the stage. It was like the music just came alive, and it was so vivid and so real that it made me cry. And I kept listening to this music all the way home, and it was like I was back in the 1970s again. It was the most unbelievable thing. And I stayed up all night listening to music, and by morning, the brilliance of the music had kind of faded away. But even today, the music is a little bit more real for me than it was before that experiment. And I wrote the doctor an email. I said, that's some powerful mojo you got in that machine. And of course, nobody imagined that it would do that. And I have a friend back home, Dave Rifkin, who you'll meet in the book. My friend Dave is chief of radiology, actually, at one of the other Harvard hospitals, and he would help me to understand some of the medical terms and the things they were doing, and he would look at the MRI images and stuff with me and explain, answer my questions. And I told him what had happened, and he said, think about it. The effect that you just described, that was the side effects. The effect of their study was how it affected you with those faces and stick figures. And what you just described is just a totally unexpected side effect. If they had any idea at all that something like that would have happened to you, they would have kept you in the hospital and given you an iPod and told you to go listen. But they didn't. And I kept going with the study. And there were, over a period of a few years, there were more than 20 stimulations, and most of them didn't do anything. Some of them did some of them were unsettling, and some were disturbing. 2 of them temporarily turned on a window into people's souls. It was like I could just look in your eyes and I could read your mind. And it was the most staggering thing. And in Look Me in the Eye, I wrote about how sometimes I would be around other people and they would talk about news that happened on the other side of the world. Bunch of children starving in Africa, or 15 people killed when a bus plunged off a cliff in Peru. And they'd start wailing and being all upset about that. And I would think, it's just bullshit. They're just making a play for attention. They don't know any of those people in Peru. They don't know any of those starving children in Africa. Sure, it's sad, but people die every day. They're just making it up. But you know what? After one of those stimulations, I couldn't read the news anymore because it would make me cry. It's not just listening to the news. I couldn't even read it. I was at the point after one of those stimulations where I could not pick up a story from the New York Times and read it to you because I would be overcome by emotion. I was disabled by not being able to read things that you would regard as ordinary. And even now, years later, I can't go to movies anymore. I used to be able to go to anything. I could go to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I know it's like your evil neighbor there, and there's no such thing as a Tucson Chainsaw Massacre. But if there was a Tucson Chainsaw Massacre movie, I could have gone to it and just sat and ate hot dogs and popcorn right through the goriest scenes. It wouldn't have bothered me a bit. Now, I can't even go to romantic comedy because it'll make me cry. I don't watch movies anymore. I don't watch TV anymore. And you know, one of my friends who I got to know who was also in this study, he's a guy my age, he read a draft of my book and he said, I didn't know the same thing happened to you. He said, ever since that TMS, I used to love reading the New York Times Magazine every weekend. And he said, now I dread picking it up. And of course, how could we ever have known that something like that would happen? And you know, one of the things about this book is it's like science fiction made real. The idea that you could turn on emotion in a person who couldn't see it. It's not that I didn't have feelings. Autistic people have deep, strong feelings, as any of you who are autistic know. The difference is that our responses aren't triggered by the things that trigger responses in others. So before I took part in these experiments, I could look at gory movies, I could read awful news, I could hear anything at all, and it really wouldn't affect me. But if my mother told me she had cancer, if my girlfriend, told me she, had hurt herself, I could be just as upset and just as scared and worried and disturbed as anyone else. I just didn't pick up the signals.